Hogwarts, rising as Harry's twin with power. Episode 41. Although Darren was also well aware that Sister Becky Greengrass must have been particularly annoying and offended many people before she met him, but he had never imagined that staying by the side of this Miss Greengrass would be so colorful. In the past 3 days, he has triggered 2 temporary tasks because of this young lady, and they are still very good rewards. If Miss Greengrass had never died, would he have been able to brush the task on this young lady? It's a reward for walking, Darren thought excitedly, but immediately, his excited eyes turned into frightened eyes. Betsy, get down. With his screams, his body pounced on Betsy. Boo. Darren's back immediately became a blur of flesh and blood. Becky hugged him in a panic and hurried to the ground to prevent the second attack from coming. It was only as she lay down that she found that someone was running on the train at a very fast speed. And while the train is moving, you can climb up. Shit. She scolded viciously. I really treated her like a sick cat. Betsy picked an angle to stand up, picked up her wand, and rushed outside in a series of attacks. The man actually used his body to resist many spells. Then he suddenly transforms into a werewolf and bites Betsy. Betsy licked her lips, felt a spherical thing out of her pocket, dodged the werewolf's big mouth, and threw it into the werewolf's mouth. Boo. At the moment of throwing it in, the werewolf's face exploded, and in an instant it exploded into flesh. When I don't use muggle stuff? Betsy snorted coldly and looked down at Darren. He was covered in blood and pale, but he was in good spirits, grinning at her. Ding. Congratulations to the host for gaining talent, natural healing. Natural healing. After suffering a fatal injury, wounds heal 500% faster. Darren accepted the reward satisfactorily. Looking at Miss Greengrass in the eyes was like looking at a precious gem. Maya, this student sister is simply his lucky star. You, what do you see? You idiot, do I need your help? Just told you not to use the body to block the spell. You will next give me a gun and play word games with me, right? Betsy shouted angrily, eagerly picking him up and running in the direction of the front of the car. Oh, she believes he is a ghost. Madame Pomfrey was in the car. This stupid guy will be fine. Killed. Slytherin killed. That girl named Betsy Greengrass has killed. It's horrible. I knew Slytherin wasn't a good person. The sudden attack caused the speed of the train to drop suddenly. There were exclamations all over the carriages. Especially watching Greengrass running at great speed with a boy covered in blood, he was even more frightened and panicked. Who made Slytherin too bad a reputation? Not to mention that this Miss Greengrass is also a fierce figure. And many others saw Miss Greengrass throw a round ball into the werewolf's mouth and blow up a werewolf. This bloody scene, coupled with seeing Darren's tragic appearance, further deepened everyone's impression. Slytherin kills. Slytherin's Greengrass is dead. Madame Pomfrey looked at Betsy and was startled. When she felt the train shaking just now, she began to check from carriage to car to check whether there were any injured people. Later, I heard that Slytherin had killed people, and I thought that there was an infighting in Slytherin. As a result, I never thought that it was Darren who had the accident. Oh, my boy, who fired the shot? Luckily I'm here, otherwise if I'm in Muggles, you're dead. Madame Pomfrey waved her wand and said angrily, how can such a good child always be hurt? The shooter was a werewolf who has been killed by me. Betsy pursed her lips and said, looking at Darren's wound, he clenched his fists. She said this guy was a little fool, and he thought he wasn't right. Oh, where is a normal person who will constantly block the wounds for others? Thinking of the boy's previous feverish, treasure-like gaze, Betsy suddenly knew everything in her heart. This boy, like her. Yes, only by liking her would he have blocked death for her twice. If you don't like it, what else can you like? But, not at all. The Greengrass family would not agree with her and a hemp. Ordinary little wizards get married, and she was 16 years old, and the cub was only 11 years old. They are much different. When he grows up, he may not like her. Betsy made countless excuses for herself not to be together, and then let herself look at Darren as soon as possible with a cold look. Even if I owe you another life, I will pay it back. Don't think you'll be able to climb the Greengrass family by saving my life again. There are some people you can't imagine, and I advise you to do it yourself. Betsy whispered in Darren's ear, Darren. Darren didn't hear a word. He was watching with great interest as Madame Pomfrey healed his wounds. The healing of the wizarding world is obviously much better than that of ordinary hospitals. The wound on her back had taken Madame Pomfrey only 10 minutes to fix, although by the time he was carried by Becky, the wound had gotten much better. Maybe wait a little longer, and he'll be healed. The bullet came out and drank the medicine. Madame Pomfrey handed him a bottle of potion, like the last time Snape had brought over the leftovers. Now, if you don't want to spend time in the school hospital just after school starts, drink it. Madame Pomfrey stared stiffly at Darren, obviously needing him to drink here on the spot. Darren had a headache as soon as he saw the potion, and after drinking a bottle for 3 days and missing 9 temporary tasks, he really didn't want to drink it. Don't worry about the child, just sleep for 3 more days if it's a big deal. Maybe this will also make you remember the word, cherish your body. Madame Pomfrey's tone was a little unhappy, and the child was really hovering on the verge of death every time, which really made her a doctor unable to see it. Hurry, drink it, and don't challenge a doctor's patience. Episode 42. Before Madame Pomfrey could give him a hard hand, Darren finally took the initiative to drink the potion. Sure enough, it was the kind that Snape had brought over last time. It tastes good and has excellent efficacy. Madame Pomfrey, after he drank the potion, examined his body again with her wand and said with a smile, "Okay kid, you can already be discharged from the hospital, of course, if you want to stay here, you can." No, it's a waste of medical resources. Darren quickly declined the invitation. Staying in the hospital, how did he brush the father's value? When I got back to the carriage, the blood stains on it had been cleaned up. Even the werewolf didn't know where he had been taken, but the carriage was empty anyway. He subconsciously looked into the corner. There was a little Lolita lying there before. Now it's gone. Don't look at it. When you encounter this kind of thing, Slytherin will choose to save himself as soon as possible. Betsy took a cup from the suitcase and tapped it with her wand, and a strange green liquid appeared inside. Drink it. She pushed the glass of liquid toward Darren. Darren looked at her questioningly. Is it to think he dies? Poison. Drink it and wear it and die. Betsy snorted coldly. Darren was relieved that it should be no problem. However, he still asked about the system when he picked it up. Ding, a healing potion secretly prepared by the Greengrass family, has the effect of replenishing blood and accelerating healing. Well, this girl is really arrogant. Darren looked up and poured it all down. Unexpected is not bitter. I didn't expect the Wizarding World potions to be so delicious. Betsy was stunned. She thought she needed to threaten and even explain what kind of potion it was before Darren could drink it. Who knew she said it was poison, and Darren drank it like that? Is it believed that she could not have been poisoned, or, the word love is really harmful? She was silent for a moment before looking at Darren. This little cub looked much better at this time, at least because of the injury. The pale cheeks looked like before, and now they all disappeared. Instead, there is a rosy little face with shiny green eyes. A strand of red hair was hard and upturned with a strand of hair, which made people want to touch it involuntarily. Well, the cubs are cute. It's just what I told you in the infirmary, you should be able to understand, Becky said solemnly. She didn't want the little cub to like her. Life is only once, and he shouldn't have used his life to do these things. What's more, no matter how much life he gives, she can't become his lover. Give it up. Her eyes were a little heavy. Such selfless love, she does not deserve to accept. The Slytherin sister could not accept the confession of a hemp wizard, even if it touched her. But this is a show of a clear head. Darren naturally saw her warning, but also saw her kindness and apology. But he didn't know what she was talking about. What the infirmary said to him. Say what? When did it come about? How does that make him answer? Without knowing the problem, he didn't dare to say it casually. Darren could only ignore Betsy's face in a daze, ready to take the time to ask Betsy again. The boy's expression was slightly weak. When I ask myself, I don't even dare to look at myself. Obviously, those words of his own did not convince him. Or rather, he likes himself more than he loves. Also, if it is just like it, how can you use your life to block harm for her? But not really. His hemp identity, the ideas he preached in public, the age of his own difference. Even if he was a pure blood, Betsy knew that it was impossible for her and him. Not to mention that he was just a little wizard from Muggle. Since it is impossible, don't give him hope from the beginning. I'll only say this to you once, and in the future you will try to follow me as little as possible, whether you agree or disagree. Betsy closed her eyes and said somewhat fiercely. After saying that, she turned away, not even daring to look into the boy's eyes. Those green eyes will be stained with water, right? It was her fault. She should have found out long ago. Darren was confused. Wasn't it just fine? Give him medicine. Why did you suddenly let him follow less? Could it be that this big lady's arrogance and pampering disease have been committed again? Or because he didn't surrender to her? Oops, Sister Slytherin, what a hassle. Darren shook his head, a little helpless. If he was too far away from the Slytherin girl, he was worried that he would not be able to brush up on the task. However, thinking about the ability of the system, he chose to believe in the system. After all, everyone is at Hogwarts, and it shouldn't be far away, just a task. Mere trifle. Less to follow, less to follow. This student sister has a yin and yang temper. He does not want to get too close. Darren didn't care to stretch out in the carriage. I was about to climb up to find Harry when I heard the horn on the train. Dear students, there is still a 5-minute train to Hogwarts. Please change your clothes, put the salute on the train, and we will send you to the school for you. Forehead, how did it arrive so soon? He felt that the time in the car was quite short. Obviously, the train at Hogwarts was very slow to be rejected by everyone. So why did he arrive without feeling anything? Darren scratched helplessly at his hair. He had really planned to talk to Harry and study how the protagonist differed from the others. As a result, we can only meet at Hogwarts now. But Harry probably doesn't know his name yet. Not only Harry, but even Betsy and Malfoy, they didn't know Darren's name. To create a sense of shock for Harry, Darren deliberately did not introduce himself to the others. It's really hidden to the point where even his own people don't know his identity. Episode 43. The train stopped. It's a dark, small platform. All students must be dropped off from here. Darren looked at the platform, and then saw a light passing over his head. Then a tall figure stood beside him. He could only look up to see the man's face. It was an extremely tall man, his beard messing up and covering most of his face. The hair on the back of his head is also unkempt and looks a little fierce. Hagrid. Darren touched Hagrid's clothes curiously. How much clothing was needed for such a huge body? First-year freshman, come here. Hagrid didn't feel Darren's touch at all. He was craning his neck to look at the crowd and smiled and said, "Harry, how are you coming over here?" It was so crowded that almost no one noticed Hagrid's voice. Only Darren heard, thinking that pretending not to hear it at this time would definitely not fit his personality, so he quickly tiptoed over and looked at Hagrid's voice. "By the way, grab Hagrid's clothes and prevent the raging crowd from squeezing him aside." "Harry? Is it my brother? Where? Where? Slow down, don't squeeze my brother in." Ding, father plus 30. Hagrid was stunned before he noticed Darren pulling at his clothes. He knew Harry had a younger brother, but he had never imagined that he would see him in such a situation. It's a cute little guy. Even if Harry was the best Hagrid, he had to say something about the beauty of this child. "You're Darren, aren't you? It's nice to see you, but Harry probably won't be able to take care of you at this time. He's already gone to the front, and you have to hurry up." He patted Darren's arm gently. Darren was almost slapped by him, hurriedly grabbed his clothes, and stood firmly. "Well, I just want to see my brother too much, thank you for your help." Darren nodded. Of course he knew that Harry had gone far, and he was just brushing the giant's father value. "You're welcome, little one." Hagrid's mouth buried inside the beard laughed loudly. He thought the little guy in front of him was amazing. He must be a Gryffindor lad. "Let's go. First-year freshmen, pay attention. Be careful under your feet." Hagrid shouted back. "Take everyone on a muddy path." A lot of people fell because of it. Darren cleverly walked by Hagrid's side, and from time to time was slapped by Hygra, and reached the edge of the Black Lake steadily. It is a black lake. On the other side of the lake is the castle above the towering cliffs. Looking at the castle from a distance, you can see the starry sky twinkling inside. "Hurry, don't rub it, get on board, don't have more than 4 people in each boat." Hagrid shouted loudly. All the students stumbled onto the boat. Darren had planned to follow a random person up, who knew that just as he stood here, he felt that someone was pushing him forward, and then went straight to a boat with no one there. Darren got on the boat and looked at it doubtfully. This is a very cute little girl, with blonde hair, green eyes like his, a mole under her eyes, and a very cold expression. Finding Darren, looked over and turned his head without a word. "Isn't this the same girl who was in the sister's carriage before?" Looking at this feature, Darren was very suspicious in his heart. She was Slytherin's sister, Cassan de la Vor. The system doesn't mean to give him Cassandra 50 favorability, how can it feel useless? And he also wears the title of a little Alita nemesis, and all girls under the age of 16 have a liking rating of plus 30 for him, which is supposed to have a favorability rating of 80. It turned out to be a no-brainer. The system doesn't play him, right? Darren scratched his hair. However, he still did not take the initiative to talk, but excitedly looked at the surrounding scenery. Crossing the cliffs covered with ivy tents is a hidden open entrance. The boat rode through the calm, waveless water, down a dark tunnel, to the bottom of the castle. Then we paddled to a dock-like place, where the boat stopped on a patch of cobblestone and gravel ground. "Get off the boat," Hagrid greeted, cleared all the boats and also found Neville's toad. Then they followed Hagrid's footsteps and climbed a path on the rock, finally walked through the damp green lawn and finally reached a gate made of oak. Hagrid stepped forward and knocked 3 times. Darren saw the wooden door open and Professor McGonagall solemnly stepped out. "Thank you, Hagrid, I'll leave it to you next." She nodded at Hagrid and led a group of freshmen to the auditorium. "It's very big here. The ceiling barely sees the end." Inexplicable torches burned on the stone walls, making this place known to the brightest. Darren, even though he had been here before, was shocked again. There was magic here. It looked like the sky outside. "I saw it in Hogwarts, a school history." Darren heard someone behind him say that. "It should be Hermione. This is a true bully." He couldn't help but give a compliment. Snort. Just as Darren was genuinely lamenting Hermione's diligence, an extremely dismissive tone came from the side. He looked back. Cassandra was holding her arms and standing behind him with a cold face, and if it weren't for Darren's good hearing, she wouldn't have been able to be sure that the sound was from her. He hesitated, a little wanting to exert his fatherly light and correct her moral values, but after thinking about it, he gave up the idea. After all, he couldn't come up with evidence that it was her voice. And Cassandra's voice was so small that no one else heard it. "This face is not good to show yourself. Forget it, there will always be scenes he plays." Episode 44. Line up, the sorting ceremony is about to begin. A sharp voice shouted. The freshmen subconsciously stood up. Darren also obediently stood behind a dark-haired boy. "I don't know how they're going to be separated." In front of Darren, someone asked in fear. Darren looked around, and everyone's faces were full of anxiety, and it seemed that all the parents had not told their children how they were disorganized. Even Cassandra's face, which had always been cold, was now slightly frightened. It is a tradition in the wizarding world to scare children. He smiled in his heart, and the bad taste was aroused. So he stood in the crowd and said hesitantly, "I heard Madame Pomfrey say that she seems to be fighting a troll." "What? Oh my god, what is a troll? I'm not going to die, am I?" The freshmen were stunned to hear Darren's words. In order to match his own personality, Darren himself showed a pale little face. His lower lip was bitten out of a tooth mark. "It looks pathetic." No one thought he was deliberately frightening when he said it, and they all thought he really thought so. They were trembling with fear, and some of the children had tears falling from their eyes. Their pitiful appearance amused many people. Even Professor McGonagall was amused by their appearance and almost laughed. Okay, quieter, now start the division. She cleared her throat and put a worn-out hat on a stool. The hat was worn, patched, and looked dirty. The hat twisted a few times and began to sing. You may think I'm not pretty enough, but don't judge people by their appearance. If you can find a hat that's prettier than I am, I can eat myself. Come and put it on me. Don't be afraid. In my hands, you are absolutely safe, because I'm a hat that can think. After the hat was sung, the applause was thunderous. Turns out we just have to put on this hat. Who said we were going to duel with the trolls? Ron shouted angrily. Darren stood up embarrassed and said guiltily, I'm sorry, I said it, I listened. I listened to what people say, I'm sorry. Father value plus 50. Madame Pomfrey, who was sitting on the edge of the teacher's seat, smiled softly. This kid, it's so cute. Darren accepted the father's value, and then he heard Ron humming in his ears very well, and then looked down and said bad things about Harry to him. Said he and Betsy, the old Slytherin witch, should be together. Evil, vicious. Darren quietly rolled his eyes. Oh boy, if you say I'm evil, then I have nothing to say. But you say that such a beautiful lady is evil. What is your conscience? Young people don't know how good their sister is, and they mistakenly regard Lolita as a treasure. He was a little upset and wanted to go forward to exert his father's light, but his shoulder was held down by a small hand. It's Cassandra again. Darren was a little anxious and pulled Cassandra's hand down. He was still busy earning the value of the Holy Father at this time, but he didn't want to fight with this girl. Don't stop him. If you go over, I'll tell Professor McGonagall and ask her to fire you and the boy together. Darren froze. Wouldn't it? He wanted to be a holy father and expel him? I believe that with your character, you don't want him to be expelled? Cassandra said with a look that saw through Darren's expression. Darren opened his mouth. That's true. Although he knew that Dumbledore could not have fired him, it was impossible for him to know this identity. So he pursed his lips, sighed, and stood in frustration. It's so sad. In the past, accusing Ron, he should have been able to obtain the value of the Holy Father. Ding, Father plus 10. Well, who gave this? What about the handouts called Hanako? Can he be bought by such a 10 father's value? Ding, Father plus 50. Hey, is this additional, or is someone seeing his pretended to be strong in his heart and sending him a touch? Darren scratched his hair, contentedly accepted these fatherly values. Meanwhile, Snape on the stage also quickly withdrew his gaze. He set his eyes on the cutlery in front of him. The empty gaze did not know what it was thinking. Darren didn't pay attention to Snape. His eyes were already on the sorting hat at this time. I don't know if the hat will listen to him and put him in Slytherin. He suspected that Dumbledore could manipulate the hat. What if Dumbledore insisted on cramming him into Gryffindor? Thinking about it this way, Darren was also a little nervous at this time. At this time, Professor McGonagall walked to the front with a piece of parchment. She shouted, Hannah Abbott. Darren nodded. Hannah of the Flowing Water, Abbott of the Iron, Hufflepuff, Susan Bones, Hufflepuff, Terry Boot, Ravenclaw. Darren pricked his ears and waited for himself to be called, until, Harry Potter. The sound of the auditorium suddenly fell silent. Darren's eyes widened, and he leaned his head back in excitement, tiptoeing as if trying to see what Harry looked like. It was only when he saw Harry's appearance that he suddenly opened his mouth in shock. Brother. He didn't seem to think that the boy he had helped before was his brother. He was happy to say hello, but thinking that this was the auditorium, and it was about to be Harry's sorting ceremony, he couldn't embarrass his brother and stood where he was. A pair of turquoise eyes sparkling. Ding, Father plus 100. Ding, Father plus 50. Ding, Father plus 80. Ding. With Darren's performance, nearly 500 father's values were suddenly credited. He accepted these father's values with excitement. He thought everyone was watching Harry Potter. I didn't expect so many people to have their eyes on him. These fatherly values should have been given to him by the professors at Hogwarts. It seemed that everyone was worried that he was jealous of Harry. That's why he made these moves and touched his generosity. Darren laughed happily. In this case, it seems that he is better off at collecting the father's value. Episode 45. Darren noticed that Harry seemed to have been communicating with the sorting hat for a long time. The teachers around him had an anxious expression, and only Dumbledore was smiling, as if he knew what was going on there. Gryffindor. After a long silence, the sorting hat finally cried out loudly, We have Potter. Great! Harry Potter belongs to Gryffindor. Harry Potter. In the auditorium, the Gryffindor table boiled over. Professor McGonagall seemed to want to maintain order, but she herself smiled uncontrollably. Finally, Gryffindor was quiet. Then she continued, Darren Porter. Potter? Who is this? Harry Potter's brother? Why haven't you heard of it? Darren didn't expect to be in everyone's attention. His face was squeezed red by him, and he looked very cute. Professor McGonagall patted him on the shoulder and whispered, Go boy, don't be afraid. Thank you, Professor McGonagall. Darren thanked him seriously. Professor McGonagall's smile grew bigger. Go, nice boy with good manners. Darren deftly walked to the side of the sorting hat, carefully picked up the hat and put it on his head. Ah, what a good boy. No one has ever treated a hat so politely. Darren heard Mr. Sorting Hat laughing quietly. He grinned shyly. Ding, perceive the induction of the mind. Is it a disguised memory? Disguise, pass on what I think. Darren wasn't surprised that hats would take their toll. I just don't know if Dumbledore intervened. The boy smiled happily when he received the acceptance letter. The boy stops a bullying of muggles. The boy said to everyone that life was equal. The boy stood in the way of the girl who had just clashed with him, The boy picked up the red-haired girl and coaxed her with sugar in a friendly way. The boy enthusiastically helped the brunette boy enter the station and happily went out to wait for his brother. The boy saw his brother enter Gryffindor and thought that he could not shame his brother. "I don't like to look at that," Mr. Sorting Hat said with some regret. "It doesn't like to look at the things that make it a little sad. That would make one of its hats uncomfortable, although it has no heart. It's just a thinking hat. Boy, let me think about it. You can go to Ravenclaw, and I see that you are very hungry for knowledge. You can also go to Hufflepuff, where the kids should love you very much. Well, you want to be closer to your brother? Then you can go to Slytherin, where the kids have ambitions and the bad kids, but maybe you can make good friends too. Oh well, it's really close, and most of the Slytherin classes are with Gryffindor. Why can't I go to Gryffindor? Are you not brave? No, kid, you don't have to worry so casually. The hat doesn't let you go to Gryffindor because you're too brave. The hat has seen your memories. You always block the danger of others. If you enter Gryffindor, the hat is worried that you will one day die under the spell of giving others a shield. Hats think you should be a little older, or in you. The word isn't a bad word." Darren felt the Sorting Hat turn around his head in a perfect mood and continued, "Cute little fellow, the hat likes you very much. And I hope that you can often go to Dumbledore's office to find the hat to play with in the future." Right, I live there. And as for your final house, don't worry, I've made up my mind, Slytherin." The Sorting Hat shouted loudly. Darren stood up with a stunned expression. Not only him, but the entire auditorium was stunned. Harry Potter's brother had actually entered the Dark Wizard's gathering place. I knew how a person who was with that woman could be a good person." Ron's voice followed suit. Darren's face suddenly turned pale. He quickly turned his gaze to Harry, as if seeking his comfort. Harry looked back blankly. To be honest, he hasn't reacted until now. The boy who helped him on the train before turned out to be his twin brother, Darren Porter. Just thinking about what Ron had said on the train, Harry was still a little uncomfortable. That Voldemort killed their parents. How could Darren go to the academy where the guy was born? Especially when he heard what Ron was saying. How can someone who is with that woman be a good person? Yeah, he had seen the girl named Greengrass before blow up a werewolf. Later, it was also said that Miss Greengrass had killed a little boy. Such a murderer. His brother was so close to her. He felt a little uncomfortable, watching Darren's gaze fall silent. He didn't look over his head. Darren's eyes gradually dimmed. He pursed his lips and walked in frustration to the Slytherin house table. There was also silence above the Slytherin table. All Slytherins did not expect that Harry Potter's brother would come to their Slytherin, and the people who knew Darren were even more confused. Isn't this guy a hemp wizard? How did he suddenly become Harry Potter's younger brother? In particular, Becky Greengrass, who was sitting on the president of the Student Union of Girls, opened her mouth in shock, revealing an unelegant scene. She even wanted to go up and question Darren. Why was she hiding her identity? Just looking at his lost soul look, he let go of the idea and stared at the other Slytherin students instead. Whoever dares to bully Darren Porter is against her. Although she had told Darren not to allow him to have any more unrealistic fantasies, she also did not allow anyone to bully him. It was when he saw Darren's lost look that he turned his head in anger. The stupid little cub entered Slytherin. Could it be that the little lion of Slytherin would still treat him as a brother? Episode 46. Darren certainly wasn't at all lost. He had intended to enter Slytherin. At first, I thought that if the Sorting Hat wouldn't let him into Slytherin, he would learn from Harry. In my head I kept saying that I was going to Slytherin, that the Sorting Hat annoyed him. It's just that this approach is a little too unsafe. He later remembered the Neville thing. In fact, Neville was more suitable for Hufflepuff at first. He loves herbs and has a good temper. It's just a bit of a coward. The Sorting Hat gave him some courage to give him a share of Gryffindor. Apparently the Sorting Cap is not so rigid, so he tried again. When the Sorting Hat is in the mind, he sees himself as righteous and courageous, as well. Your courage is on display to the maximum. Sure enough, the Sorting Hat felt that his courage was too much and did not recommend that he go to Gryffindor. Instead, he was more recommended for Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw. Of course, after he offered to be closer to Harry, he was assigned to Slytherin. As for the fight scene with Harry, there was no way. After all, as a little holy father who worshipped his brother, how could he not seek his brother's comfort after being assigned to Slytherin, which was the opposite of his brother? It was Harry's performance that made him a little confused. Why, your brother was assigned to Slytherin, and your brother was the bad guy. This really doesn't give him a whole deal. He had intended to tell Harry after he nodded to him that Slytherin and Gryffindor were the same, that they were all good boys, and that they had reaped a wave of father value. When Harry did this, his holy father light was not brought into play at all. Sure enough, reality is not a game and cannot be carried out exactly as he imagined. Darren sighed again. I felt like my heart was bleeding. At this moment, how many father's values have been lost? When the food comes up in the back, he just ate a big chicken leg, bit a chicken claw that he didn't know who gave him, nibbled on a piece of cake, and took a small pudding with milk. Absent-minded ate it. Well, what a fragrance. If it weren't for his current human setup, he would have learned from the Gryffindor side and gobbled it up. However, he was now a little holy father who had just been rejected by his brother, and he could not make such a strange move, which would make him look like he had no heart and no lungs. The boy was absent-minded from the time he was assigned to Slytherin until the end of meal time. Snape suspected that he might not know what he was eating. Because he saw Malfoy next to Darren, he put a chicken foot in his plate with a bad eye. and he ate it casually. Snape seemed to see who he was. When she was assigned to Slytherin, Lily had the same look as Harry Potter. No, Lily was just a little upset and laughed afterwards. They were good friends at the time, but Harry Potter is different. He ignored Darren in full view of everyone. Didn't he really think how sad his brother would be in his heart? Snape looked with some disgust at the Gryffindor table, the devouring Harry Potter, and the Weasley's cub next to him. A reckless boy, in the eyes of this Potter, was even more important than his twin brother. Snape snorted coldly. How stupid. Harry had completely forgotten about Darren's entry into Slytherin. In the end, he is just a small child, and he is forgetful. He was angry that Darren had entered Slytherin, so he deliberately ignored him, but then thought about going to Darren tomorrow. It was his brother after all, and he still liked it. And his brother looked cuter than he was, and Harry was still very proud of him. He thought that there must have been some misunderstanding. Maybe Mr. Sorting Hat had made a mistake. Mr. Sorting Hat also wanted to send him to Slytherin House, but he insisted on not going. Darren shouldn't have known that the Sorting Hat could refuse, so he went to Slytherin. Anyway, Harry felt that he wasn't like those bad wizards. He had only been angry because Ron had said that Darren and Slytherin had come closer. He felt that Slytherin was a bad guy except for Darren. Darren shouldn't have approached them. It's just that this has to be said tomorrow, and he still needs to face the feast in front of him. He raised his eyes and glanced quietly in Darren's direction. He's dealing with a piece of cake. Fortunately, his anger did not affect Darren's appetite. Harry ate and drank with relief. Finally, his stomach couldn't fill up a little more. That's when he looked up. He saw Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore talking seriously, but Dumbledore shook his head. He also saw Professor Quirrell with a ridiculous piece of cloth wrapped around his head on the back of his head, and what to say to a professor with greasy hair and hooked nose. But the professor didn't listen at all. His eyes were looking at him with disgust. Oops. Harry covered his forehead. What's wrong? Percy asked. No, nothing. Harry shook his head. The wound goes from painful to disappearing for a moment. The only thing he remembered was the sallow professor, who probably hated him terribly. Who was the professor who spoke to Professor Quirrell? That's Professor Potions, Professor Snape of Slytherin House, and he loves to deduct points from Gryffindor, and I hope you don't get caught wrong by him. Percy shrugged and said. Harry looked up at Professor Snape for a moment, who was no longer looking at him. Harry looked back, feeling hungry again, and wanted to take another piece of pudding, only to find that everything on the table had disappeared. Dumbledore stood up. Well, everyone has eaten and drunk enough, so let me announce the precautions. First-year students are forbidden to enter the Forbidden Forest, as are students of other grades. Mr. Filch asked me to remind everyone not to use magic in the hallway. Finally, I would like to remind everyone that those who do not want to die a tragic death and encounter accidents should not go near the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor. Harry laughed and found that only a few people were laughing like this. Now, let's sing the school song. As soon as Dumbledore waved his hand, golden ribbons flew out of his wand, twisting into words over the table. Prepare, sing. Episode 47. It was hard to finish singing the school song. Harry stumbled and followed the Gryffindor students forward. His eyes were almost too sleepy to open. Before leaving, he glanced back at Darren at Slytherin House. He was now hunched over his little head and was being pulled in front of him by the president of the Slytherin Student Union. Harry was a little upset, but too sleepy, and forgot why he wasn't happy. He came to the dormitory, and as soon as he lay down on the bed, he fell asleep. Darren was also sleepy at this point. He kept rubbing his eyes with his hands, yawning after yawn. The crooked one was pulled forward by Becky. When you raise your spirits, you will have to go through the selection of the prefect in a while. I don't participate, Darren said hurriedly. He didn't want to be a prefect. If he were to become a superior, he might have wasted a lot of his time as a holy father. No, every student has to participate. Professor Snape will stare at it himself, and whoever doesn't participate will be locked up for a semester. Yes? No way? In the novels he read in his previous life, Gryffindor did not have a prefect selection contest. Even if Slytherin is a little harsher, it will not be locked up without participating, right? Looking at the expressions of the people around him, it was obvious that Betsy did not scare him. But I won't. Magic. Darren opened his mouth in confusion. He learned a feather catum leviosa, a floating spell. You can't do magic. Betsy was stunned. Impossible, right? Getting the book and the wand. Hasn't this guy tried a few spells? Darren blushed. He has been brushing tasks for 2 days. Where does he have time to read books? Yes, I'm sorry. He lowered his head embarrassed and pursed his lips guiltily. Betsy had the heart to talk about him, but looking at his appearance, she resisted the poisonous tongue. Finally he frowned and said, then you go up, give them a punch, and smash them down with your fist. What? Let him do such an ungraceful act by a little holy father? No. If he really had to fight, he felt that it would be better to find someone to stand up for himself and then solve all the troubles at once. Who is this candidate? Unsurprisingly, Darren noticed Malfoy eavesdropping nearby. Ah hey, it's you. Don't. Darren blurted out, and he tried to raise his voice and said, I've been strong since I was a child. I'm afraid I'll hurt them. Whoops, ha ha ha, laugh at me. Harry Potter's brother actually said that he grew up strong. Ha ha ha, then you punch me. Let me see how strong you are. Draco Malfoy approached with a wild laugh. Looking at Darren with disdain, he said. Darren's fist tickled a little in an instant, but he resisted. With a generous smile, he said, you don't know. I don't blame you, but I'm really good. Ha ha ha, it's funny to see this Potter bragging. Boy, you're afraid you're even more cowardly than your brother. Weak. He laughed loudly, and many of the Slytherin students around him laughed. Darren looked down and whispered, "Oh, immediately you will know that Lao Tzu is really the Holy Father. System, redeem 1,000 father value silently for 1 minute. He has gained a lot of father's value today, using 1,800. Affordable. It's a bit of a waste to use this minute of silence in your fist." But, in an instant, Darren was filled with power. He raised his fist and slammed it hard into Malfoy. "You apologize to my brother. You are not allowed to scold my brother." Malfoy didn't react at all, and felt a fist just right on top of his head. Then he flew up, and when he landed on the ground, he heard a whoosh sound. The amulet spell given to him by the family shattered. "Potter kills." Malfoy got up from the ground and cried out in fear. Darren was stunned. He stood in place for half a day before he reacted, silently really good. He was able to shatter Malfoy's talisman with one punch. If Malfoy didn't have a talisman, would he have killed him? Darren thought hesitantly. But it immediately occurred to me that if Malfoy didn't have the amulet, he might not have dared to fight in front of him so wildly. "If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Potter, there's a small infighting going on here." Then Slytherin buckles 10 points. And a week of confinement. Just as Darren was hesitating to go up to Malfoy to show his fatherly gesture, he heard Snape's sarcastic voice coming from behind. He quickly turned around, lowered his head guiltily, and his eyes gradually turned red. "I'm sorry, Professor, I injured Malfoy." "You, fire me." He turned his back and wiped his eyes, as if crying. Ding, father plus 80. Draco Malfoy looked at Darren now. The fear of the moment had dissipated quite a bit, and said happily, "Potter, you're done, you may have to go home with something grey." Darren was almost amused by his expression. "Silly kids. This is a retreat to advance." Leaving the famous Harry Potter brother out of school, Dumbledore did not have Alzheimer's disease, and Snape did not have snake venom. He was just showing weakness, showing that he didn't mean it. As a result, this guy jumped out like a villain. In contrast, he guessed that Snape's intention to let Malfoy go, because the Malfoy amulet charm was broken, but this time it was gone. Really? After Malfoy finished speaking, Snape's cold eyes were already looking at him. In a sarcastic tone, he said, "It seems that Mr. Malfoy Jr. did not realize his mistake and was confined." Darren noticed that Malfoy's expression looked like he had eaten. He was a little sympathetic to the little villain in front of him. Malfoy asked incredulously, "Sir, it was Potter who almost killed me." "Very well, 2 weeks of confinement, plus a letter to Lucius. Yes, I will write it myself, if I let him know that you are so reckless." Episode 48. "Don't," Malfoy blurted out, looking pleadingly at Snape. If Dad knew that he was so reckless in provoking others, like a stupid lion, actively begging others to beat him, he might be pumped to death. Snape smiled happily. He seemed to snort, whisper, "Must." And 2 weeks of confinement. Malfoy was gone. Frustrated, Darren stood aside. Darren almost laughed out loud. However, because there were too many people, I quickly took it back. But his body still trembled twice. Snape's deep gaze fell on him for a moment, and he opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something, but was silent. He turned his head and quickly led the group of Slytherins to the underground lounge, where the frenzied black robes represented his bad mood. One by one, the frightened Slytherin students lowered their heads, did not dare to speak, and could only quietly follow his robes to the lounge. They suspected that Professor Snape was going to pick them up. Sure enough, as soon as Snape arrived at the lounge, he pulled out his wand. He stood in the very center of the lounge, looking at everyone with cold eyes. This kind of gloomy gaze made everyone not doubt that if he made a sound in the next second, he might be greeted with a death curse. "Snort," Snape sneered, then said in a loud voice. Stupid, ununited. Even after the arrival of the professor, no one explained to the professor what the reason was, and the prefect did not take the lead. "All Slytherin students copy the Slytherin house rules 100 times, and I will receive them personally, one by one, if I don't write them in my house." Scold. With a sigh, the topic was over. No one dares to say no to their own family. Obviously, Snape's prestige was extremely high in Slytherin. Maybe he didn't think anyone would dare to contradict himself. Snape said the topic just now, and then mentioned another thing. "The selection of prefects begins now, starting from the 1st grade, and after the selection, the 1st grade goes back to sleep early," Snape said coldly. Darren wanted to laugh. The guy obviously saw that he was sleepy, so he said so. He had heard that the previous Slytherin did not have this rule. "Well, new this year, 1st-year students gather here." Betsy raised her wand and shouted. Darren dragged his steps over. The other students around him were a meter away from him. They may have wanted to laugh at this brother who was not liked by the famous Harry Potter. However, after seeing Darren's fist, they finally woke up. This guy is just a freak. Fists that can shatter the talisman spell. They don't think they can take a punch. "Darren, you go up first," Becky said to Darren. The power that Darren had just shown really shocked her. However, this guy is strong and she is satisfied. She lifted her chin, looked at the other 1st-year students, and said coldly, "Tyke, you go challenge Darren." Teak is a brunette boy. Hearing Betsy's words, she almost cried. He remembered the power of Darren's fist and wanted to say he didn't want to go, but he didn't dare. Therefore, he could only take heavy steps to go up. He felt that the other classmates looked at him sympathetically, as if they were looking at his cemetery. "I'm Tech Montely. I want to challenge you," he stuttered. Then he wanted to say what he had conceded defeat. However, before he could say it, Darren, who had just been very powerful, shook his head in embarrassment and said that I conceded defeat for 3 words. Huh? Tech looked at Darren sheepishly. As far as Darren's strength is concerned, how can he not concede defeat? Do you look down on me? Tech was a little annoyed. Although Darren conceded defeat, it looked like he had won. He didn't want to win like that. No, no, no. Darren shook his head hurriedly, and he laughed shyly and whispered, my power can't be controlled, as long as I use it. He glanced at Malfoy. Tech understood. Once used, it is like killing people, and it really cannot be used easily. But how could it not be that Darren conceded defeat? Only when the power is strong should we stand here. No, I just heard you say that you should choose a stronger prefect. If someone bullies you in this way, he can also help, but I can't. I am easy to kill people as soon as I appear. So, he bowed his head guiltily. Obviously, I felt very sad that I couldn't help. Ding, father plus 20. Ding, father plus 30. Ding, father plus 10. Ding. In a few words, Darren gained more than 300 Holy Father values. Although everyone gave a lot, it was obvious that everyone recognized him. I'm still a little afraid of him. Most people still walked away from Darren when he conceded defeat. I was afraid of making him angry. Annoying someone might be just a few spells. To make this guy angry, that's a punch. Darren sighed in frustration, standing at the end of everyone, alone like a little pitiful. Snape stared at his figure, was silent for a moment, and finally said coldly, Darren Porter has a dormitory for one person, and no one else is allowed to step into his dormitory casually. The little cub had offended Malfoy. Draco was a child he had watched grow up, though not the kind that was broken to the bone. But they are by no means good people. Moreover, Darren also broke Draco's amulet, and perhaps the next revenge would come from Lucius's teachings. He couldn't have stared at Malfoy all the time, and Darren couldn't have exploded that force at any time. That power Dumbledore had spoken to him. Silently, a controlled silence. But Dumbledore had also told him not to let Darren use that power again, if not at all. This unknown force, who knows if it will turn into a hypnotist. Therefore, he must not let that little cub use that kind of power again. Episode 49. With Snape's words, the whole Slytherin breathed a sigh of relief. Don't say Snape doesn't want them to be in a dorm room with Darren, or they don't want to be in a dorm room with Darren. Who knows if this guy will get angry one day and just punch them to death. They didn't have Malfoy's amulets in their house. Snape skimmed his lips and waved his hand, signaling the rest of the contest to continue. He noticed that the boy's eyes were almost closed. The position of prefect of the first grade ended up falling to Cassandra. Snape looked at her without emotion and waved her away with her freshman. That's when Darren noticed that Cassandra had also come in Slytherin. Also, this is Slytherin's sister. It's normal to come in, and if he hadn't come in, he should have felt strange. Darren yawned. Follow all the freshmen to the dormitory. Frightened, the last row of Tech's classmates walked trembling, afraid that Darren would punch him. Darren skimmed his lips. Does he look like such a violent person? It's just that he's sleepy now. He did not want to radiate the light of his father. Just want to lie in bed and sleep. After choosing a bedroom, I fell asleep as soon as I plunged into the bed curtain. 7 o'clock the next morning, Darren stretched out of the dormitory. As soon as I walked around the corner, I found that all the first-year students in Slytherin were all ready and were sitting in the lounge in a daze. Just wait for you, Malfoy said unhappily. He didn't want to wait for Darren with the other students, but Cassandra disagreed and put his wand on his head. Frightened, he had to raise his hand to surrender and decided to succumb to it once. I'm sorry, I'm up late. Darren apologized in embarrassment. He really didn't expect that Slytherin was all together in class. It's not too late, everyone will come out after 7 o'clock, Cassandra said in a rather soft tone. Her temper was learned by Slytherin except for Darren. It's even colder than Sister Becky. And do it without a word. The spell makes it very skilled. It's like a third-grade female bully. Even more reprehensible is her coldness. No pretense for everyone. She had coldly informed all the students last night that they must meet in the common room at 6:30. Today 2 students came late. She punished her with her wand, scared the first-year freshmen into silence. Originally they thought Darren had come so late. It should have been repaired by this Miss Worley. Maybe even 2 people will have a fight. Who knew that this young lady had actually changed the time of gathering directly later? Although it was said that they could get up a little later, everyone felt a wave of displeasure in their hearts, unhappy with Darren. Even if he is very strong, he can't be so domineering. Good things have let him occupy. He can occupy a dormitory by himself, and he can also let the high-cold Cassandra modify the wake-up time, which is really unwilling. Darren immediately noticed the expressions of the classmates around him. Hey, how did he feel that this Miss Cassandra Vore was a little directed at him? He didn't believe that every Slytherin student was so self-conscious, that they all got up so early, and then waited quietly here, unless someone told them to do so last night. That's why Darren would see such a shocking scene as soon as he came out. So here's the problem. Why didn't anyone inform him last night? Even if the others were afraid of him, he thought that this Miss Cassandra Vore should not be afraid of him, so why didn't she inform him? Even if he had gone to bed early last night, and this Miss Cassandra had called the door, he should have been able to knock on the door this morning to wake him up. This Miss Worley specifically forced so many people to wait for him to wake up, and then modified the time to get up later when he got up late. This is simply causing trouble for him. But, for a holy father like him, this is the kind of trouble he wants. Last night, he was still worried that he had become stronger, that no one would dare to mess with him, and now he felt simply too happy. Of course, he needed a little lesson to this card sister. Ding, aware that there is a scene played by the Holy Father system around the host, now release the task. Go to everyone and say in a guilty tone, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please don't change the time for me. Next time I will definitely keep up." Ding. After the mission is completed, the spell talent is +2. Will the host receive the task? Pick up. Although the reward this time is only a talent point, but a few words, Darren did not find it difficult at all. He blinked, walked over to all the freshmen of Slytherin, bowed his head sincerely, and said in a guilty tone, "I'm sorry, I didn't know everyone got up so early, I thought. I'm sorry, Borley doesn't need to change the wake-up time for me, and next time I'll definitely keep up with the other students. I feel very sorry for the delay in everyone's time." The more he spoke, the more sad he became, and his eyes gradually became red, but he raised his head and quietly forced the tears back. Just a slightly choked tone, representing his uncalm mood. Ding, mission accomplished. Congratulations to the host for gaining the spell talent +2. Darren lowered his head and accepted the reward happily. On the surface, he still had a face of guilt that he couldn't bear to do such a big mistake. Let the classmates who had just resented him also slightly dispel some displeasure. None of them are stupid. The pure-blood families from Slytherin, even when they were young, knew some of the subtext better than the students of other houses. This Potter seems to be een. According to Darren Porter's apology just now, it should be that the prefect did not inform him last night. But why notify? Is it just to see this Potter joke? Or against this Darren Porter? But no matter how to target, how can you use them? At this time, Slytherin, who was present, at the same time raised a trace of displeasure with Cassandra. For this matter, it will not end so easily. They will write back to their parents and hope that this prefect lady will not do such a childish act next time. Episode 50. Cassandra Vore didn't know what kind of person he was. Maybe the worst person in the world is herself? From an early age, she enjoyed letting others get into a fight because of her. And if they could fight, it was her feat. She likes that. Before coming to Hogwarts, her reputation had spread a little. That stemmed from the fact that when she was too young, she had been unsuccessful once or twice, and she was known to some people. But thanks to her family, even those who knew what she was like, no one dared to say that she was wrong. The ancient family, the beautiful looks, the mighty power, wasn't she, Cassandra, superior to everyone? It's just that there are fewer and fewer interesting things in this world. Cassandra always felt too bored. She began to enjoy sleeping. A man sleeps in a corner, asleep, and time passes, even on the way to school, until she heard a boy's voice on a train at Hogwarts. Otherwise, "Shall I go down first?" She's a little annoyed. Go down. Why is the voice a little high? Wake her up. She had thought of having a seizure. Who knows that pretending to sleep also has this benefit? She heard a whole bunch of interesting topics. What Malfoy's revenge? What a lesson that boy did not give a curse. Ridiculous to kill her. What a stupid act this is. She was relieved and forgave the stupid guy for waking herself up to sleep. Just as she was about to continue sleeping, she suddenly heard the stupid boy shouting, "Sister, get down." This sound startled her. The body trembled. Then she opened her eyes and saw a red-haired boy lying on Betsy, covered in blood. She reflexively left the carriage and waited until she was in a safe place to recall the boy's behavior. Is it another curse? No, it seemed to be blocking the gun. It was a muggle gun. She had played with it. Won't die, right? She thought this guy was inexplicably funny. This guy should like the woman named Betsy, right? Otherwise he wouldn't have made such a stupid move. She kind of didn't want this funny guy to die like that. Fortunately, the guy didn't die. She saw the guy coming out of the school infirmary, and Betsy the woman. Cassandra laughed softly. Beautiful fingers across the beautifully shaped lip flap. She felt that the next trip to Hogwarts would be a wonderful trip. Sure enough, it was her. The sea of people can also find him with the back of a head. This guy was just as stupid as he appeared. A sense of justice explodes. And it seems to be the brother of the famous Harry Potter. Probably? She heard the Hogwarts Ranger, the guy with the alleged giant bloodline, call Harry. And then the stupid guy got excited. As far as she knew, there was only one Harry who enrolled this year, and that was Harry Potter. Well, things are getting interesting. In the Black Lake, she deliberately pushed the guy into a separate boat. She was deliberate and wanted to scare this guy. Who knew that after this guy got on the boat, he didn't doubt her intentions at all, smiled and looked at her, and looked around excitedly. She was disgusted to find that this guy was like a dirt bun. In order to see Hogwarts above the cliffs, with his head up, he almost fell into the Black Lake. Cassandra had to cast a stabilizing spell on the boat for her own safety. Stupid indeed. But how could Cassandra, as a villain, stop there? So she completely followed the boy and became the spirit behind the guy. She saw that the boy had a foolish kindness, integrity, and even to anyone, spared no effort to find their shining point. Even when a girl from a hemp breed showed her knowledge, he sincerely praised it. Cassandra snorted. That's stupid, isn't it? She had never seen such a stupid person. Hey! The guy seemed to hear her taunt and looked back at her. She lifted her chin and the word funny flashed in her eyes. This guy isn't going to argue with her, is he? That's fun. Cassandra was thinking about how to argue, but the guy looked at her with tolerance and turned his head again. What? Why didn't this guy argue with her? Why don't you argue with her? Look down on her? Cassandra was furious. She stood with her arms folded. Aside from hearing a freshman say that the odds of being assigned to Gryffindor this year were high, the conditioned reflex revealed a little fear and waited for the boy to reveal his weakness. She heard the boy say, Madame Pomfrey said the sorting house was going to fight the trolls, and scared himself pale. It It made her happy. I almost didn't laugh out loud. And when the Sorting Hat finished singing the song, something more interesting came. The dirty red-haired kid at the front said this guy and that Betsy were evil and vicious. Then the guy was not happy. Cassandra saw that he was not evil, because the redhead said he was evil, but because the redhead said Becky was evil. Hey, that might make her laugh for a year. So, she grabbed the guy before he was about to rush up to the theory. If you go over, I'll tell Professor McGonagall and ask her to fire you and the boy together. Well, that's not angry? Have a fight with her? Or fight? I believe that with your character, you don't want him to be expelled? Cassandra said with a look that saw through him. When they are ridiculed, they don't believe it or get angry. Wait a minute. Cassandra was shocked. This guy really just honestly put up with it. Can't stand it, it's so angry. Cassandra couldn't stand this grievance. This stupid red-haired guy, she remembered,